The little family restaurant was almost ready to close. It was a cold Tuesday night in late November, and the last customers had already paid their bills. Only one table remained occupied, a young mother, her coat still on, sitting with her two small children. A half-eaten plate of fries and 3 water glasses sat in front of them. They had been there for nearly 2 hours. The manager, Thomas Carter, had noticed them the moment they walked in. He was 58, a widower who had run Carter's Corner for 31 years, and he prided himself on keeping things orderly. He had watched the mother count coins in her purse, then quietly order just one plate of fries to share. He had seen the children eat slowly, carefully, making each fry last. And now, as the clock ticked past 9, he felt the familiar tightness in his chest. Tables were for paying customers, and kindness had limits. He wiped his hands on his apron, squared his shoulders, and walked toward their table with the firm stride he used when someone had overstayed. The mother saw him coming. She immediately began gathering crayons and napkins, pulling her children closer. The little girl, Sophie, 5 years old, buried her face in her mommy's sleeve. Her brother, Elijah, 7, looked up with eyes too old for his face. "Ma'am," Thomas began, voice low and official. "We're closing in 10 minutes. I'm going to have to ask you to," he never finished. Elijah reached across the table and gently touched his mother's hand. In the smallest, clearest voice he whispered, "Mommy, are we in trouble again?" The question hung in the air like a prayer. The mother, Rachel, smoothed her son's hair and answered softly, "No, baby, we're just resting. It's okay." But her eyes, when they met Thomas's, were filled with a quiet plea he hadn't expected. Thomas stood frozen, the rest of his stern words stuck in his throat. In that single moment, he saw what he had missed before. The patched knees on the children's jeans, the way Rachel's coat was buttoned wrong, because one button was gone, the small duffel bag under the table that held everything they owned tonight. Then Sophie lifted her head and looked straight at him. She gave the shyest smile and said, "Thank you for the fries, mister. They were the best we ever had." 6 words from a child who had every reason to be afraid, and they broke something open inside Thomas Carter that had been closed for a very long time. He felt his planned speech turn to dust. Without a word, he pulled out the empty chair and sat down slowly, like a man whose legs had forgotten how to hold anger. "I'm sorry," he said, voice suddenly gentle. "I didn't see." Rachel tried to smile. "It's all right," she whispered. "We'll leave. You've already been kinder than most places." Thomas shook his head. "No," he said. "You'll stay." He stood, walked to the kitchen, and began pulling warm things from the oven. Chicken tenders, mashed potatoes with gravy, green beans, soft dinner rolls still in their basket. He carried it all back himself and set it in front of the children like it was Thanksgiving. Elijah's eyes grew round as moons. "Is this really for us?" "All for you," Thomas said, and to his surprise his voice cracked. He brought chocolate milk for the kids and a steaming cup of tea for Rachel. Then he sat down again and simply listened while she told him, in quiet pieces between bites, what had brought them here. Her husband, David, had been killed by a drunk driver 8 months earlier. The insurance barely covered the funeral. The medical bills took the savings. Yesterday, the landlord changed the locks while they were at the laundromat. Tonight was their first night with no address. When the children had eaten until their eyelids drooped, Thomas made a quiet phone call to his sister Ellen, who still lived in the old family house a few miles away. 20 minutes later, Ellen arrived with blankets, 2 pairs of warm pajamas that had belonged to her own grandkids, and a smile that looked exactly like Thomas's when he was younger. She hugged Rachel like a daughter. She knelt down and opened her arms to Sophie and Elijah, who walked right into them without hesitation. Ellen looked at her brother with shining eyes and said softly, "You always said this restaurant was about feeding people. Looks like tonight you finally understood what that really means." Thomas cleared the table himself, locked the front door, and led them all upstairs to the small apartment above the restaurant that hadn't been used since his own children were small. He had kept it clean, kept the heat on low, just in case, he always said. Tonight he understood why. He showed them the 2 bedrooms, the little kitchen stocked with cereal and milk, the bathroom with fresh towels. Sophie tugged on his sleeve. "Mr. Carter, does this mean we have a home tonight?" Thomas knelt down so he was eye level with her. "It means you have a home for as long as you need," he said. "And tomorrow we'll figure out the next day together." Rachel stood in the doorway, tears running silently down her cheeks. She tried to speak, but no words came. So she simply walked over and wrapped her arms around Thomas like he was family she'd been missing her whole life. The next morning, Rachel came downstairs wearing one of Ellen's old aprons. She tied her hair back and started taking orders before Thomas could protest. The children sat at the counter coloring new pictures that said, "Thank you, Mr. Carter," in careful crayon letters. 6 months later, Carter's Corner had a new sign in the window: Rachel S. Special. Kids eat free on Tuesdays. Rachel ran the front of the house with a smile that lit the room. Sophie and Elijah called Thomas Pop now, and every night they saved him the corner booth so he could read them the dinner menu like a bedtime story. People still talk about the night a manager walked over ready to ask a family to leave and ended up giving them a home instead. They say if you sit quietly in Carter's Corner on a cold November evening, you can almost hear it again. A little boy asking if they're in trouble. A little girl saying thank you for fries. And the soft, unmistakable moment when God whispers a different path to a heart that's finally ready to listen. Sometimes the greatest miracles begin with the words we almost say and the kindness we choose instead. If this story warmed your heart the way it warmed mine, share it with someone who needs reminding that second chances still happen, especially when we let love speak louder than rules. And the next time you see a family lingering a little too long at a table, maybe you'll remember that God might be asking you to walk a different path tonight.